It is good to see you here tonight. Will you join me in a word of prayer? Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I'm going to let you in on a little trade secret, only it's not really a secret. Most pastors, if you force them to choose, and I think Caitlin and Jim would agree with me on this, if you force most pastors to choose, they would rather do a funeral than a wedding. And this isn't because we don't like weddings, or we're morbid or killjoys or anything like that. It's that as a pastor, that is, as someone who was supposed to proclaim the Word of God, as someone who is supposed to care for and love people so that they can hear the Word of God, so that they can trust God's promises, so that they can respond in faith and live faithful lives, so that they can find comfort, strength, and courage, so that we can be part of a people that is pleasing to God and a blessing to the world. As a pastor, you stand a better chance at a funeral than at a wedding. Look, weddings are good and joyous things, but sometimes, amidst all the celebration, all the hoopla and hullabaloo, all the photographs and flowers, the color schemes and cakes, the dresses and tuxes, the parties and toast, the rehearsals and the rehearsal dinners, sometimes, amidst all of that, the pastor's homily, you know that little sermonette the pastor gives in the service? Well, it can get lost. In fact, sometimes the whole religious dimension of the ceremony can get lost. Shocking, I realize. Not so the funeral. At a funeral, people tend to listen. They want to know whether faith has anything to say in the face of death. And I know this because people talk to me after funerals. You know, nowadays, it's become a custom to have tributes during a funeral. Friends and family members stand up and remember the departed, tell stories, pay tribute. And it sometimes happens that during one of those tributes, somebody, usually a golfing buddy, stands up and says, "Jim, I know you're up there on the 13th tee looking down on us. And all I have to say, Jim, is you'll never have to take another mulligan again." And people do listen. A day or two, maybe a week later, somebody sidles up to me and says, "You know, I was at Jim's funeral last week, and I was just wondering, is there really a golf course up there?" And that question leaves me with some explaining to do, both then and now. Because in terms of our understanding of heaven, it's not that the golf course language is wrong. Speaking of heaven in terms of the 13th tee is fine, at least for Jim and Jim's life, and other metaphors are fine for other people's lives. But if that's the only thing, or the only kind of thing we can say about heaven, then we've left a lot out. And our understanding of heaven and eternal life is, to say the least, impoverished. And if that's true, we pastors have no one but ourselves to blame. I put a quotation in your bulletin from Tom Long. He was our Festival of Faith speaker this past year. He's kind of the guru for Presbyterians when it comes to preaching. And Long makes this point emphatically. A sea change has occurred over the past 100 years. Outside of the funeral homily, Presbyterian pastors, mainline pastors in general, no longer preach about heaven. Quote, "A veil of embarrassment has been thrown over the whole matter," end quote. And I think some of the reason for that embarrassment can be found in tonight's scripture reading. The book of Revelation, chapters 21 and 22. It's one of the most famous descriptions of heaven. And well, what do you find there? Again, quoting, "And the 12 gates of the heavenly city are 12 pearls. Each of the gates is made of a single pearl, and the streets of the city are made of gold." Streets of gold and pearly gates. That's the stuff of cartoons, old jokes, and even older camp songs. Fun, and at times funny, but who can take it seriously? A veil of embarrassment has been thrown over the whole matter. What I want to do tonight and next week is get us over that embarrassment. I want to talk seriously about heaven. Tonight in terms of what heaven is like, and next week about why we should believe the promise of heaven and the difference that belief makes for our lives here on earth. So here's my first and most important point. Heaven is not primarily about the endless extension of me, into the remotest reaches of eternity. That's nice to think about, at least for me. I'm not so sure about for others. But anyway, that's not what heaven is primarily all about. Heaven is about the fulfillment of all things. The fulfillment of all things includes the immortal life of us as individual persons, but more than that, much, much more than that, it includes the making right of all creation. Back to Revelation chapters 21 and 22. Reading again. "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, the home of God is among human beings. God will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying will be no more, for the first things have passed away.'" And continuing, "And the one who was seated on the throne said, 'Look, I am making all things new.'" Think about that language for a second. God will wipe every tear from every eye. God will make God's home with us. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain no more. God will be with us, and we will be with God. And all things will be as they are supposed to be. That is the language of cosmic fulfillment, the making right of all creation. And that cosmic fulfillment, more than anything else, even more than the extension of me into eternity, that is what we should want, what we should long for, what we should hope for. That is what heaven is all about. And to show this to you, and that it really is what we deep down want more than anything else, I need to discuss two kinds of moments. Moments which in one sense are extraordinary. They stand out from other moments in our lives, but in another sense are quite ordinary. I think everyone has both kinds of moments at one time or another, and some people, maybe the saints among us, perhaps have both kinds of moments with great frequency. I'll leave that for you to think about. But the first one I want to talk about is what I call transcendent moments. Moments when it seems as if time stops, and we get caught up in, swept away by something so beautiful, so glorious, that it seems far, far greater than ourselves and anything else we've previously experienced. If we could step outside one of these moments, and who would ever want to, and try to put them into words, and of course our words would be inadequate, we'd say this: yes, 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 yes. This is right. This is beautiful. This is a way it's supposed to be. The easiest example I can give you is music. Almost everyone has experienced some kind of transcendent moment through music. But it doesn't have to be in music. The whole point is that these moments can happen anywhere, anytime, often, usually, most always, when we least expect it. Hanging out with a friend, in the arms of someone you love, watching the sunset light up the tops of the trees, orange, red, and light and green, catching a ball, taking a walk, eating your favorite food. And already I'm in trouble because I'm starting to construct a generic list, so you'll know what I mean, a list of such moments. And by doing so, I'm betraying those moments. Those moments have a kind of vivid particularity, a beautiful thisness that makes each such moment just what it is. And the truth is, I don't have to construct a generic list for you to know what I'm talking about. You've had those moments. You know what I'm talking about. It's in those moments that we touch eternity, or maybe better, that eternity touches us. And when we're in those moments, we want them to go on forever. That's the first kind of moment. The other kind of moment seems to me to be at the opposite end of the spectrum. I call it the moment of loss. The moment when we see something, when we experience something, and it's as if we've been kicked in the stomach. And if we could talk, all we could say, what would well up inside us in a kind of howl of protest, is no. No, no, no. This is wrong. This is terrible. This is not the way it's supposed to be. This sucks. And of course, occasions for that kind of moment are all around us. All we have to do is watch the news, open a newspaper, go online. But do we really even need the media? Sometimes the noise of the media only numbs us, only blinds and deafens us to the loss and all the losses, to the suffering and all the suffering, to the sadness and all the sadness that besets our world. That loss and those losses, that suffering, is all around us. It's right here tonight. If only we had eyes to see and ears to hear. And maybe in some strange way, it's kind of a blessing that we don't. The magnitude of the pain and the loss might overwhelm us. Somebody said it would be like hearing the squirrel's heart beat or hearing the grass grow. We would grow mad from the noise. But even there, sometimes, that pain, that sadness, that loss, it breaks through. It hits home. And again, you don't need me to give you a list of generic examples. You've had your own such moments, I know. But maybe just one personal and recent example, so you know what I mean. Our son, who is in the 4th grade, has a bit of a crush on his 4th grade teacher. Those things happen. And I don't blame him because I do too. I mean, in a different way and for a different reason. I have a crush on her because she's a terrific teacher. She is skilled, loving, dedicated, knowledgeable. My 4th grade boy likes going to school, enough said. Well, Wednesday night, all the parents received an email from her telling us that she had been diagnosed with colon cancer and that although it had progressed into her lymph nodes, they wouldn't know how bad it was until her surgery this coming Tuesday. But what was important to her was telling her class that she and we would help the children understand this and deal with this in the right way. And then she said how much she loved the children, how much she would miss sharing the field trips and the fun events of the last month of school with them, and how she hoped they would send her pictures of those events and those field trips. And my son was old enough to say it. And he said it in just about these words. No, 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 no. This is wrong. Mommy and Daddy, this is terrible. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. This sucks. Two kinds of moments. Moments of transcendence and moments of loss. So you want to know what heaven is like? Heaven is the fulfillment of all things, the making right of all creation. So think of it this way. Take all of those transcendent moments, all of them that have ever been experienced by you and anyone else, raise them to the infinite degree and make them forever. And then take all of those moments of loss, all of them, ever experienced by you or anyone else, and imagine them gone, wiped away forever. Every one of them having been set right, all of the tears dried, all of the suffering and pain gone forever. That is what heaven will be like. God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying, pain, never again. And the one who was seated on the throne said to me, "See, I am making all things new." Cosmic fulfillment, the making right of all creation. That is what heaven will be like. And of course, it's hard for us to imagine that in this world where we experience both kinds of moments and lots of times in between. So we use images to try to describe what that's like. Teeing off on the 13th fairway and never having to take a mulligan. We use images of pearly gates and golden streets. Or even, and this is the Bible's favorite image to describe what heaven will be like, even a marriage ceremony where heaven and earth will become one, the fulfillment of all things. You see, the religious dimension doesn't always get lost in marriage. And of course, in this cosmic fulfillment, we have our part to play. We too, by the grace of God, will be part of it. But it is first God's plan and God's doing. And God has done it, is doing it, and will do it through Jesus Christ. He is the one who came to set things right. He is the one who lived and died so that death and mourning and crying and tears and pain would be no more. He is the one who came to us so that our joy might be made complete. It is God's doing through Jesus Christ, and it is far greater and involves far more than just ourselves and the infinite extension of ourselves through all eternity, although it involves that too. And more than anything else, we should long for that cosmic fulfillment, that making right of all things. And of course, I recognize that this cosmic fulfillment, this language of Revelation 21 and 22, is a promise, at least right now, a promise of what is yet to come. Now, this promise is not an empty one. It has something, everything in fact, to recommend it, namely Jesus' life, death, and resurrection as a down payment, a blessed assurance that this promise will come true. Think about it this way. When John the Baptist's disciples come to ask Jesus whether he's the real deal, are you, Jesus, really the Messiah? That's what our master John wants to know. Think about how Jesus answers the question, what he says to them. He says this, "You go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight. The lame walk. The lepers are cleansed. The dead are raised, and the poor have good news preached to them." In other words, Jesus is saying, this is it. Right here and now, the making right of all creation has begun. And you're seeing it and you're hearing it. Go and tell John that. And yet, as powerful as the witness of Jesus' earthly ministry is, it is still just that, a witness. The work is not yet complete. It points to something still to come. All things have not yet been set right in creation. Cosmic fulfillment awaits us. It's still a promise. So it's legitimate to ask why we should believe in and trust in this promise. And it's legitimate to ask what difference believing in this promise makes for our lives here on this earth. It's legitimate to ask those questions, but we're going to have to wait till next week. But for this week, it's enough for us to hear the promise. It's a promise that can be metaphorically cast in terms of a golf course and pearly gates and streets of gold, but those metaphors are not the heart of the promise. The heart of the promise is this: faith does have something to say in the face of death. Faith says this: love is stronger than death. The passion of God is fiercer than the grave. Or to go back to Revelation 21 and 22 again, faith says this in the face of death: see, I am making all things new. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water, a gift of water from the spring of eternal life. The home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. That is what heaven will be like, and that is the promise given to us through Jesus Christ. Amen.